Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article of discussion is about bank mergers. When you look at the economy right now, there is slowing down in the market. There is economic doldrums that is present in the industrial sector. There are increasing non-performing assets in the banking sector. This is supposed to be arrested. That is why the government has come up with a key reform, that is consolidation of about 10 public sector units into 4 entities. Let us try and understand how these merger of the public sector banks, the amalgamation of the banks is going to arrest this trend that is seen in the market, and let's also focus what would be the significance as well as concerns because of this particular move. When you look at the history, there was Narsimhan committee that was appointed in the late 1990s. According to this particular committee, there was segregation of banks. The banks were segregated into strong banks as well as the weak banks. These strong banks were ones which were performing efficiently. Then there were weak banks where there was increase in the non-performing assets and they were not efficient enough in the market circumstances. This is when the Narsimhan committee came up with a recommendation. It came with a recommendation saying that all strong banks, in case they are performing well, their efficiency has increased with respect to time, such banks will have to be amalgamated or they'll have to be merged. Let's say there is the weak bank which is not able to showcase efficiency, express its efficiency and effectiveness with time and period, such banks will have to be shut. So what is the recommendation? In case there are strong banks, merge them together, and in case there are weak banks, shut them. However, what the current government has done is it has not shut the weaker banks. Instead, it has amalgamated the weaker banks with the stronger banks. This recommendation of Narsimhan committee cannot be implemented by the government because in case it is implemented, the weaker banks will be shut and that will result in large number of people becoming unemployed. There will be layoffs and this will ultimately result in trade unions coming up onto the roads against the government, which will be a major embarrassment for the government. That is why the government has taken this initiative of amalgamating the weaker banks with the stronger banks in the current scenario. So under the scheme of amalgamation, which are the banks that are merged up? Let's understand them. We have the Punjab National Bank, Oriental Bank of Commerce and United Bank of India, which is merged into one single entity, and this will be led by the Punjab National Bank. Also remember, the three banks that are upgraded, merged together, are technologically similar, and what they also use is a technologically compatible Finacle core banking system for their operation. Next in line is the Canara Bank, which has been amalgamated or merged with the Syndicate Bank, and this will be headed by the Canara Bank. What is so important under this amalgamation is that both these banks are in the southern part of India and this have similar business cultures, and that is why these two banking system would also facilitate a smooth transaction in the future. Then we also have the Indian Bank, which will be merged with the Allahabad Bank, and this will be led by the Indian Bank. Following this is the Union Bank of India merged with Andhra Bank as well as the Corporation Bank, and this will be headed by the Union Bank of India. So in place of about 27 public sector banks back in the year 2017, what we will currently have is about 12 public sector banks from about 27 in the year 2017. So this is assumed to be the second wave of initiatives taken by the government in the backdrop of slowdown in the economy. So what is the first wave of reforms? Recently we have also seen the government has liberalized the FDI as well as the FPI when it comes to the market as well. Now let us try and understand what are the other reforms that have been initiated under this particular process. In order to make the management accountable, what the government has also come up with is called as the board committee. What is this board committee? In a banking system, there are number of people. There are managers, there are people who are working for that banking system. What used to happen under the earlier system is, though there was large scale accountability, there were certain managers who were not accountable. That is why a board committee will step in right now, and it is this board committee which will ensure that there is accountability in the banking system. So all the board members of the bank will have to report to this board committee, and they'll have to appraise about the performance of the officers up to the rank of general managers, including the managing directors. Following this, the bank can also employ or recruit what is called as the chief risk officer. The bank will ensure that the best talent, the best minds in the market are sucked up into their banking system, and it is these chief risk officers who would be able to ensure the banking turbidity in the system is somewhat controlled. So what the banks are allowed is to bring new talent who have established themselves in similar circumstance into their banking module, so that they would be able to reduce the non-performing assets. This is followed by what is called as the succession plan. Every bank for that matter will have managing directors, managers, so on and so forth, who are recruited into that banking system. Eventually they'll have to leave the system because of their age as well as number. During this particular transition, when that particular manager is going to leave, what they will have to eventually come up with is an individual developmental plan, and it is this individual developmental plan which will help in replacement of the outgoing ones by the current ones in the banking environment. The government has also come up with what is called as the residual service. Let's say, for example, there is a person who is working in the banking sector who has wide range of knowledge. His experience is very much required for the banking sector. In case they happen to leave this particular banking sector, their area of expertise will leave an immediate lacuna. So there is a time that is required for the replacement. During this particular period, what the board will also be able to do is enhance or also upgrade the particular duration or tenure to about 2 years. This means the time for exit has come. However, this can be further enhanced by about 2 years, so that there is suitable person into this particular job role. This is followed by increasing the engagement with the non-official directors. There are already people within the existing banking system, but these people will have certain prejudices or they may lack certain knowledge. So what we need is a person outside the banking system. So a person outside the banking system will be put within the banking system, so that these people would be able to have due deliberations, add new values, improve the quality of deliberation that has been accommodated in that particular board. So what is required is such person who has 20 or odd years of experience within the banking sector, who would be able to come up with new innovations and new ideas and bring about a turnaround in the banking sector. Such people will also be included in the banking system, so that they can provide value into the system. So this is to do with the reform that has been initiated by the government. So what would be the significance of this particular move? The consolidation currently offers a major economies of scale for the banking sector. How? Let's say, for example, the Punjab National Bank, Oriental Bank of Commerce, or United Bank of India all come up together. So what we see is leveraging or pulling up of all resources. This will ultimately result in increase in the manpower, better efficiencies, and all this will eventually lead to increase in the credit capacity in the banking system. What the government also realized is that there are a number of public sector banks which were not able to meet the criteria that were set by the global standards, which means they were minuscule or very small when compared to the global standards, the global banking system and international banking system. That is when they were not able to grow or they were not able to expand in reference to the global standards. So what this merger will currently do is all these banks would be able to meet the criteria of the global standards, increase your operational efficiency, and also reduce the cost of lending in line with the global standards. Another important factor for the government is when there is a public sector banks, the government will have to have a vigilant eyes on number of banks. So the focus will have to be on multiple banks. With this particular merger, what the government can now focus is minimum number of banks rather than more number of banks. Let's say, for example, we had about 10 public sector banks. This has been currently amalgamated into 4 banks. Initially, the government had to focus on about 10 banks. now the focus will only be on about 4 banks. So what the government will be able to do is it will be able to assign the capital in a much better way in order to control its stakes in these public sector banks. Having looked at the significant aspect, now let us focus on the concerns. The government here has initiated a key reform, that is maintaining and sustaining all these banks with respect to the global standards. In line with the global standards, what needs to be focused on is the governance pattern, good governance and efficiency. So what the government should also avoid is appointing all its political stooges into the banking system. When you look at the earlier system, what the government used to do is appoint government representatives who are politically connected. This has to be replaced by those people who are intellectual, and those should be based on merit is the first key concern. So the appointment of the political stooges in reference to their political alignment has to be stopped, and what we need is a merit based selection that needs to be pictured in the board in the future. When you look at mergers in the past, let's take for example the Bank of Baroda, Dena Bank and Vijaya Bank. What you saw was there was less of friction when it comes to these mergers. Why? Because there was one larger bank and there were two smaller banks, so there was less of friction when this particular merger happened. But when you look at the current scenario, there would be more friction. Why? Because there are banks like Canara Bank and Syndicate Bank which are well capitalized. Both are stronger banks. Both will have their values and system and their modus of operation. In this particular backdrop, what the article suggests is that there will be more friction, there will be more undue problems, and this will have to be reduced eventually. And at the same time, in the previous mergers, what you also see is that the absorbing bank was actually kind of stronger enough. But in this particular case, the absorbing bank like the Punjab National Bank is also fraud with issues, and it has also resulted in number of scams. This is another concern that has been voiced under this article. The third concern that is voiced under this article is with respect to the overstaffing. As we all know, the public sector banks have large number of people which is not required to meet its intended objectives. However, there are large number of people. This will have to be reduced over a period of time. But what we will also see during this particular process is that number of banking officials will be laid out, and there would be red flag that would be raised by the All India Bank Employees Association. So the government should be able to withstand all this pressure and ensure that the banking system is in a stable mode. As these banks get into the merger mode, there will be issues with respect to synchronization, branch rationalization, as well as realigning. And what we will see is a spike in the non-performing assets, which would immediately have impact with respect to their profit. So what the government will also have to ensure is that initially the profits may come down because of the rising NPS. So the government will have to withstand all these pressures going forward. So what is the conclusion that we can draw? The government has come up with some of the key reforms in bringing about the amalgamation of this banking system. But what is required going forward is less interference from the government, less appointment on the basis of political appointees, and what we need is good governance, appointment of people who are merit oriented, less interference from the government, less constraints and hounding by the government, and this will have to ensure that there is less of trouble by the government and more of efficiency that is delivered by the banking system. So that should be the next milestone, is what this article speaks about. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about West Bengal Prevention of Lynching Bill 2019. When you look into the background, the Supreme Court had come up with a judgment where it had requested the central government as well as all state governments to come up with anti-lynching law. In line with this, the West Bengal government has initiated this bill, and it has passed a bill to prevent and punish all the incidents of mob assaults as well as lynching. Let us try and understand what are the provisions as per this particular bill passed in the Legislative Assembly. This bill has come up with a definition. It defines lynching as an attempt or an act of violence that has been perpetuated by a mob, which means the number of people who are lynching or harming another person who happens to be the victim on the basis of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth, language, different ethnicity, political affiliation, or any other ground. So there is a victim and he has been lynched or abused by a number of people. Such people who will be lynching or abusing another person will be falling under this lynching bill that has been initiated by the government. To put this bill into practice, what this bill prescribes is the appointment of a nodal officer. It is this nodal officer who helps in intelligence gathering. He will gather the information, provide a periodic assessment of all this local intelligence, and gives this as an input about the potential flashpoints in that particular region. So what he basically does is that he'll identify those areas which can be a flashpoints in the future where the mob can go about lynching a victim. Such flashpoints will be identified and it will be sent to the state governments so that this can be avoided. In case, in spite of all this intelligence gathering, there is a commit of this heinous crime of lynching, what this will result in is an investigation that will be conducted by an officer not less than the rank of an inspector. So ideally, they believe in preventing that particular lynching, but in case they are not able to protect the victim, in case they are not able to stop it, then the investigation will be conducted by an officer who is not less than the rank of the inspector. During this particular process of investigation by the sub inspector, it also calls for the victim protection as well as compensation for the victim. According to this provision, let's say there is a victim who has suffered and there is a witness who is ready to provide the evidence for it, come to the court of law and answer to the questions of the court of law. But during this particular period, in case there is a threat, coercion or inducement from an alternative source, such should be stopped is what this article trying to speak. In this particular reference, it has also come up with certain penal provisions as well. The legislation pitches for a jail term which can be from 3 years up to life imprisonment. If there are people who are found to be guilty, in case they are assisting or interfering with that of the accused person, such people would have the penal provisions of 3 years. Then they'll also have a maximum fine of 1 lakh as well. In case it results in death of that victim, then this will lead to rigorous life imprisonment and also a fine of about 5 lakh. So this is what this law all about. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about Himachal Pradesh Freedom of Religion Bill 2019, which is an anti-conversion bill. India is basically a pluralistic society. It is a country of religions. It is inhabited by people from multiple religions as well. As a safeguard to minorities as well as practitioners of a particular faith, what we have in the Indian Constitution is Article 25. It is this Article 25 which gives the freedom for a particular practitioner to follow it, and it is this that will guarantee the minority the safeguards to practice of their religion. Let us look what Article 25 says. It speaks about the freedom of conscience, free profession, practice and propagation of religion. The freedom of conscience here basically deals with what I assume as God, what you assume as God internally. So internally, I may assume that God is great. Internally, I may have a fixed pattern of God. Internally, what I assume God to be is what is called as the freedom of conscience. So any person, any individual, if he is able to internalize the presence of God, that is the freedom of conscience. This is followed by the right to profess, which means that the internalization in the form of conscience, when it becomes an external format, that is called as professing, which means that I can declare myself as a proud Hindu, proud Christian, proud Muslim, proud Sikh, so on and so forth. So every individual, every person in India, if he is declaring that he is a practitioner of a particular religion in a proud way, that is something to do with professing. This is followed by what is called as practice. Many of the Hindus conduct homas as well as havanas. They wear marks on their forehead. They wear rudraksh and other types of things. When it comes to Christians, they go to Sunday masses. When it comes to Muslims, they go to namaz 5 times a day. This is what is called as practice. This is followed by propagation of religion, which means you can go about propagating your religion, the ideas, the ethos and connections of your religion. Express to the people of India what the religion stands for. Tell the people of India what are its ethos, the principal values. It is this which stands for the propagation of religion. Also remember, under the practice of the Sikh religion, carrying of kirpans are also included in the profession of Sikh religion. Further, Article 25 subclause 2 says nothing in this article shall affect the operation of any existing law or prevent the state from making any law. In line with this, number of state governments in the past have also passed what is called as the anti-conversion laws. Let us try and understand what are these anti-conversion laws. Orissa was the first state in India to come up with a legislation restricting the religious conversions. This is in the form of Orissa Freedom of Religion Act of 1967. After this particular legislation was passed, number of other state governments have passed as well. That is, Madhya Pradesh also came up with Madhya Pradesh Freedom of Religion Act of 1968, and there were other states like Arunachal Pradesh, Gujarat, Chhattisgarh, so on and so forth. Let us try and understand what is this Orissa Freedom of Religion Act of 1967. According to this particular act, it provides that no person shall be converted to another religion either directly or indirectly through the use of force, inducement or fraud. Any person wanting to convert from one religion to another, this person should not be forced by a person from another religion. He cannot be threatened to convert to a different religion. He cannot be coerced to convert into a different religion from that of the parent religion. So anything which is done under coercion and threat, such thing will be falling under the force, and the Orissa Freedom of Religion Act had barred something like that. So under the act of inducement, it is something to do with gift or gratification, either in cash or in kind, either luring that particular person from the parent community to a different religion by giving him financial advantages or also bribing him. So this will ultimately result in providing him all those financial and pecuniary benefits, which is inducement in cash or in kind, by asking him to leave this particular parent religion, come to the new religion. Even that is opposed in the Orissa Freedom of Religion Act. Then this is something also to do with fraud as well. That is coming up with mispresentation, coming up with lies which is proved as facts. So there is fraudulation that is happening in this particular backdrop. So this Orissa Freedom of Religion Act ensured that a person cannot convert to a different religion by force, inducement or fraud. In line with this particular law of the Orissa government, the Madhya Pradesh government had also passed a similar law where it required a person who is converting to a new religion to produce a legal affidavit where he or she is not under any pressure, force or allurement, and such person is going on his own will. Such a documentation will have to be provided to the district magistrate, is one of the criterias that was laid in the Madhya Pradesh Freedom of Religion Act of 1968. While all this was happening, the Orissa Freedom of Religious Act of 1967 and the Madhya Pradesh Freedom of Religion Act goes up to the High Court. Why? There was a question whether the state government can come up with a law in line with respect to Article 25. Accordingly, it goes to the High Court of Odisha as well as the High Court of Madhya Pradesh. The Madhya Pradesh High Court said that this can be done by the relevant state governments. However, the Orissa High Court also said that this cannot be done by the state government. Therefore, the High Court came up with the judgment where the High Court of Odisha said that this cannot be initiated by the state government, and the High Court of Madhya Pradesh said that this can be done by the state government. So there was conflicting views. That is when it goes up to the doors of Supreme Court. In a particular case called as Ravi Stanislas versus the state of Madhya Pradesh and others in the year 1977, it ultimately goes to the Supreme Court because of the conflicting views. In this particular case, which was presented before the Supreme Court, there were two valid questions that was asked. One is, does right to propagate of religion also include the right to convert? And the second question that was asked, does the state government have the powers to make such a law? In order to answer these two questions, the Supreme Court came up with a 5-judge constitution bench. The Supreme Court held both these acts passed by different state governments is valid enough as this fell within the purview of the state government, as this was passed to avoid disturbances, that is with reference to the public order. So what is present in 25 of 1 subject to public order, that has been taken by the state government, so it falls within the purview of the state government. Why? Because there can be communal passions which can be rigged up on the ground of forced conversion. So the state government has every right to ensure there is public order which is restored. That is why both these acts were held constitutional. Another question is, right to propagate, does it also include the right to convert? To this particular question, the Supreme Court has also said the right to propagate one's own religion does not also mean the right to convert any person from one religion to another religion. So there is no fundamental right to convert any person from the parent community to another religion, is what was the judgment passed by the Supreme Court. Why are we looking at all this? That is because in order to understand if this bill is constitutionally valid or not, the Himachal Pradesh had passed a bill to understand if it is constitutionally valid or not. That is why we had to understand Article 25 as well as the past judgments. So what are the provisions according to this particular bill that has been passed? The bill seeks to repeal the Himachal Pradesh Freedom of Religion Act of 2006. The bill also proposes stricter penalty up to 7 years in jail compared to the 3 years under the existing law. So what has been enhanced is a jail term from 3 years to 7 years. The bill also prohibits conversion by mispresentation, force, undue influence, coercion, inducement, marriage or fraudulent means, which we have also discussed. So what this article currently says is, in case there is a person who also wants to convert to a new religion, he also will have to give a 1 month notice to the district magistrate stating the reason as to why he is converting, and also ensuring that this is done on a free will, not by force, not by coercion, not by threat or any mispresentation or undue influence. At the same time, the priest who happens to perform this ceremony will also have to give 1 month's notice in advance. So this is what this article all about. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about the space command. When you look at the present scenarios, there have been multiple warfares. One that is on the land, air, sea and cyber domain. All these are multiple different independent fronts. In line with this, there is a new independent domain that was launched by the United States of America's President Donald Trump, which is called as the Space Command, and this is to do with warfare in the space. Currently, when you look at the security architecture of the United States of America, it is the Air Force which is currently controlling the space warfare. But going forward, what we will have is the Space Command, which will come up and develop new specialized systems as well as preparation module. Why did United States of America come up with a new command? That is because of China and Russia's advancement in the military final frontier. When you look at China, they have illustrated that they are able to target all the satellites that are placed in the space. So they are able to target the satellites, they can bring about disruption in the satellite system. That is why America has initiated this particular step. In the past, Russia has also taken steps where they are able to create space-based laser weaponry. So what the Space Command will do is, it will ensure that it can defend the American interests in the space, such as hundreds of satellites, communication as well as the surveillance system that is present in the space. That is why this Space Command has been initiated by the American government. Moving on, let's look into the next article. This article here, spelling out the government's RBI windfall is transfer of surplus from the RBI to the government, has been discussed in our previous CNAs. So kindly look into it yesterday as well as the day before yesterday's CNA. Let's look into the next article. This article is about the Kashmir crisis. We have discussed this for the past 3 weeks. So kindly look into our earlier CNAs. Now let's look into the next article. This article to do with GDP growth will be part of the economy this week. So this will be released on that particular video. Now let's look into the prelims practice questions. Consider the following statements. The term religion has not been defined in the constitution. The term Hindu includes Buddhist, Parsis, Jains as well as Sikhs. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer to this is one only. Why? Because Parsis does not fall under Article 25. It is Hindus, Buddhists, Jains as well as Sikhs and not Parsis. Now let's look into the next practice question. With reference to the Saharia tribe, they are the ethnic group in the state of Madhya Pradesh. They speak a Munda language that belongs to Austroasiatic language family. Which of the above statements are incorrect? The answer to this is none. Why? Because both these statements are right. Let's look into the explanation. They are an ethnic group in the state of Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan. They are also located in the hills of Ganjam district of Orissa, Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, Tamil Nadu, West Bengal and Plains division of Assam. Why have we picked this up? Because there is a reference that has been made with respect to the Saharia families, and these are one of the 75 scheduled tribes in the country and are classified as the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements with respect to Consumer Protection Act of 2019. District Forum entertain complaints where the value of claim is up to 20 lakhs. State Commission entertains complaints where the value of claim is about 20 lakhs up to 1 crore. The complaints for value of claim exceeding rupees 1 crore can be filed in the National Commission. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer to this is none. Why? Because the Consumer Protection of 2019 has brought about number of changes when it comes to the pecuniary jurisdiction. When it comes to the 1986 Act, it is mentioned. However, the new rule says a different story, and that is district complaints can go up to 1 crore, state complaints 1 crore to 10 crore and national complaints above 10 crores. Why have I picked this up? Because there is a reference that is made with respect to State Consumer Disputes Readdressal Forum. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which of the following are correctly matched? Nazca Plate, western coast of South America, and Juan de Fuca Plate, a small tectonic plate in the western North America. Both these statements are right. So the answer to this is 1 and 3. Why is Cocos Plate wrong? That is because it is subducted beneath the Caribbean plate just off the western coast of Central America, and it is not the eastern coast. And Scotica Plate, it is to the north of Australian plate. It is not Australian plate but the Antarctica plate. This is the picture which explains about the Cocos Plate as well as the Scotia Plate. Now let's look into the next practice question. Regarding the taxation system of Krishna Deva Raya, the ruler of Vijayanagara, consider the following statement. The tax rate on land was fixed depending on the quality of land. The private owners of workshop paid an industries tax. Which of the statements given above is correct? The answer to this is both 1 and 2. Now let's look into the mains practice question. Discuss the implications of bank mergers in India, which has long-term gain and short-term pain. The next question is, the anti-conversion bill protects the majority culture but fuels minority tension. Suggest measures to mitigate the fears of both sections of society. Please write all your answers on the comment section, and if you have liked our initiative, please do subscribe to our channel, like it, comment on our comment section. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.